Well, last month, as you know, the Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 researchers, and two of them specifically focused on labor market efficiency. They focused on the problem of how is it that we can have both jobs available and unemployment at the same time. And this is something that drives people who are in government positions, particularly elected positions, crazy, because like, why do we have unemployment? There are jobs out there. Why aren't you getting into your job? And you and I talked a little bit about this before, which is some of this has to do with skills, and our theory is not that people are uneducated or unskilled. It's that the skills that are relevant to today's output are not what people have in some cases, because the economy is changing so fast. We're having to learn new things, and we're actually building things, making things in different ways so quickly that people have to pick up these skills. So that is just one of them. The research, particularly 2 of the award winners, Dale Mortensen and Christopher Pissarides, both of them are focusing on how people search for jobs and how companies search for people, and what are the impediments, what are the things that keep those 2 from getting together. It's not just job search, but is it other things? Is it things like regulatory requirements that once you hire somebody, you have to fulfill, and so it makes you less interested in hiring someone? Is it other things like the cost? Is there kind of a minimum cost to hire someone that I'm concerned about as an employer? So they looked at the entire spectrum, and they have built some models that model this so that you can test it. You can say, well, if I have this regulation, or if I take away this regulation, if I have this tax, or if I take away this tax, if I have these skills, or if I have this requirement, what happens? Of course, an economist is always interested in equilibrium. They're interested in matching exactly the demand for work with the supply for work. And when we don't have that equilibrium, which is what we don't have today and what they're studying, which is you have unemployment and you have job availability. They would call that disequilibrium. We're not in equilibrium. And so now it's all about what is that. And I'm excited by this because we are occupying a little bit of that space. Because there are a couple of things that we want to solve, and that is we believe strongly we should be separating benefits, our retirement plan, our health care, all the basic admin from our source of works, from our source of employment.
When you say you're talking about free agent source?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Free agent source. We think that's when you have everything bundled up in your employer, that's an impediment to free movement. I am less likely to move. Why do people stay in their jobs? Some people, you hear them say, I don't like my job, but I have to stay here for the health care. I don't like my job, but I have to stay here for the other things. Or it's difficult to switch to another job. And that difficulty, the long interview process, the fact that I need my benefits, all of those are impediments to change. And that's one portion to what this research is talking about. They're willing to consider anything that prevents fluid movement of people to jobs. And another thing that we talk about at Free Agent Source is that we're not in the middle. We don't want to be the agency in the middle that tries to control the relationship. And I think in economic terms, an economist would call that an impediment as well, that a gatekeeper is trying to extract a large margin off the billable amount and not let the client and the consultant or independent contractor negotiate with each other about what the services are and what the rate is. And of course, we're all about that. We're absolutely in favor of, yes, you two get together, you work it out. We just want to facilitate the back end and take care of the services that you need. And so those are two two of the many impediments that go on in the market, I think, that prevent fluid movement of people to work. And that's why I'm excited. This is some research. This is much broader research than what Free Agent Source is about. But I find it really interesting that there are a lot of other people out there in the world that are saying, "Wow, how can we bring more equilibrium to the market?"
We talked, I think it might have been the last show, we talked about how employers are sitting on jobs. There's tons of job openings. The Journal reported that we don't have a job shortage, we have a hiring shortage. We looked at the possibility that's really based on reticence and insecurity and risk in the market. And I wonder if those if our Nobel winners factored fear and risk into it. But I saw some recent news about, obviously we know that returning military is a huge thing. We just had a major series of wars. Those wars arguably cost us enough in debt that, it did it had a serious effect on the economy, including the job market. And ironically, we have a vast number of military now returning home that are having a hard time finding jobs. Now, initially, the reports were good, that, something like 89% were transitioning into the civilian workplace. And then those numbers dropped sharply to about 53% within a month or so. And now we find that states are trying to look at how can we invest in helping the military find jobs. Foundations are doing that. The Walmart Foundation started doing that. And what I find interesting about this is that they're focusing in part on retraining. Now, you think, because the military's marketing engine says that, this is the best training in the world and this will take you into civilian life. And I think maybe culturally and politically, we're reticent to admit that maybe some of the training in the military does not transition immediately into civilian life or even necessarily well, because while we've been fighting those wars, civilian life has changed. It's not just that the job market has changed, but the rapid pace of change itself, whether we're talking about Web 2.0 and technology and cloud applications and all that sort of thing, have really outmoded some of, even, if you were a software developer in the military, we've outmoded some of the types of software projects that corporations, are sort of still doing, but finding too expensive because you can host applications in the cloud, et cetera. So you come home, you're used to doing it in a conservative way that worked in the military and that was very expensive on a huge budget. And lo and behold, you're trying to get a job in a corporate market that has cut budgets and has looked to technologies like cloud applications to do exactly that, and you're undertrained. The other thing that's kind of dovetails with that is simultaneously there's an incredible plethora of training scams that have cropped up. All kinds of people are out of jobs. All kinds of industries are shutting down. Just as you and I predicted that Barnes and Noble would be, their stores would start closing up shortly after Blockbuster. And then what was it? A month ago we saw Blockbuster did close. And I think this week in the news, Barnes and Noble has announced, well, we're going to build a different kind of store. It's just you sort of walk in and download stuff, which you and I think still agree that that's the wrong idea. Why do I need to walk in someplace to download something? Thank you very much.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I kind of like the idea of having a place to go to hang around with other people, but
yeah,
go ahead.
I do too. I don't think I usually download before I go do that. But I suppose a downloading kiosk might be a place for some kinds of people to meet people. I just think that a lot of people will find that just as I don't need to go to a central location to download tunes to my iPod, I don't need to go to a central location to download books to my Kindle. But anyway, my point is the retraining scams that are cropping up are luring people to spend, their last savings. Some of them are selling their car, spending $15,000 on these retraining things. And maybe they're getting a certificate in web security. And then they get out of this and there's no job. There's no placement. There's no job, because nobody needs that. And by the time they finish by the time they create the educational materials, it's out of date. By the time they finish training it, it's way out of date. So a lot of the military are actually being lured into these retraining scams. And so we have this vicious cycle that's making people people less saleable and less competent, not more so. The only other thing I wanted to ask you about is, well, really two things. One, do you think that the Indian model of doing things, that their impediments to adapting to the changing requirements of the workplace are fewer than ours, that their ability to sort of instantly reorganize and conglomerate around an idea, a technology, or a need is much more rapid and has fewer barriers economically in terms of risk and in terms of just cultural limitations and perspective? And then along with that, what do you think are the key impediments that HR people and hiring managers are really facing that are causing them to sit on these jobs, whether it's been identified by these economists or whether we see this in comparison with a place like India that maybe doesn't have the same types of impediments to growing their economy at a time when we're struggling?
I think India has more impediments. They have more. They are still a far less flexible economy. India is powerful as an economy, at least in the space of outsourcing, the space that we've seen, in the American press for the last 10 years is because they are English speaking. A large number of the population is and college educated, and so you very much can talk in the same language, and which makes it possible to outsource. And of course, their wage base and economic base is a lot lower. So therefore, you can take like jobs and theoretically ship a lot of that overseas. I don't think that's a sign of flexibility. It just means that a section of their economy can absorb work that's done in the U.S., but not necessarily an indicator of being fast on their feet. Certainly fast and so forth, but far more regulatory issues and far less predictability in their government. Taking politics out of it, people, I think, generally still agree that the regulatory environment in the U.S. is still more predictable and reliable, meaning that from administration to administration, yes, we do have shifts in policy, and there are big shifts, but still it's predictable. You don't have to be looking over your shoulder as a business person to say, if what I'm doing today is legal, is it going to be illegal tomorrow? And is somebody going to come in and either take my business or slap some serious penalty on me? Now, the next time, because it happens to be a change in the local government or something. I'm mainly talking about corruption or pseudo-corruption that's really hiding behind laws. So, of course, I'm just making really broad, sweeping statements, but that's my take on it, is until that is clean and predictable. For HR, what are the major impediments? There are a lot of them. A lot of people would say it's regulation is too complex to be an employer, too much taxation. I think you can bundle that all into just a fixed cost, which even if you strip away all tax and all regulation, you still have almost a fixed cost, because when you hire somebody into a permanent full-time position, the implication is, yes, you stay here until I release you, and or you stay here until the person quits, whichever comes first. And so, which means you have to then pay the salary to retain the person on your roster until you stop paying it, and your, of course, demand is much faster than that. It's going up and down, and sometimes you can keep the person busy, and sometimes you can't. And so my personal view is it's that fixed cost. It's sort of like saying, do I want to buy this plant, or do I want to rent as much equipment as possible so that at a much shorter notice I can not be saddled with that fixed cost? And so in my opinion, that's the problem with hiring, is that when we hire, we're loading up on fixed costs, and we got to be really sure of our future demand. And I would say a lot of businesses just aren't 100% sure, and that's partly because of where we are in the economy, and that's partly because the economy is becoming more volatile. It swings faster, which you and I talk about all the time, how things are changing so quickly.